We're taking you deep into the complicated world of your food supply. Whether it's a steak, salad, or slice of bread, there's a lot happening in the process of getting what you eat to your table, and you should know about it. Who owns the farmland? Who is growing your food? Do we have a secure food supply? Is our food safe? And are we stewarding the land and animals well in the process? In this 5-part series, we're pulling back the curtain and answering those questions. I'm Rita Rogers.
And I'm Cecily Dickey. This is the Boom Clap podcast where culture and conviction collide.
Today, we talk to the owners of 2 dairy farms, a raw milk micro dairy in Tennessee and an organic dairy farmer and cheese processor in BC, Canada. We also invited a conventional dairy farmer to add perspective, but they declined. There's a lot of buzz on the internet about raw milk, but that's not the whole story. We explain pasteurization, homogenization, and nutritional value, also how cows are fed and hormone use. Make sure to subscribe and listen to the other episodes in this 5-part series on food supply. All right, it's clear on this series that we love small business. We love small farmers. We love small business. And one small business we love is Row Casa. Row Casa Organics provides for your home needs like cleaning products, soaps, lotions, all of those details for around the house. And it's a small company that we love with clean ingredients that we also love.
Yeah. And the other thing they have is like wellness stuff as well. So stuff for hormones, stuff for when your family is sick or just wanting to give your body extra support. They actually started with elderberry syrup and didn't even mean to start a business. Like that's the kind of business that I love, where it's just like a mom trying to figure things out for her family. And before she knew it, she like grew this whole massive business that we love. And like they have great customer service, no matter how much they've grown, which is a lot in the past while. They maintain that total small business, family business feel when they're dealing with their customers. So we love Row Casa. You need to check out the link in our show notes and go shop them. And if you use the code BOOMCLAP, you get 20% off your first order. Why don't you just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your life, and then we'll get into it.
So I'm Jelaine. I am a mom of 5, like you alluded to, Cecily. So yes, very busy. Our oldest is 17, and then they're kind of step down all the way to 6. Our youngest is in kindergarten this year. So that alone is busy, but because we're on a farm, it's a nice lifestyle altogether. So we're often working together. And when you're working with family, usually it works well. I mean, there's always complaints about chores. You know how kids are.
Yeah. But
because you are together, it still feels a little different than like a 9-to-5 job where you're away from your family the whole day and then you're coming home to 5 busy kids. It spreads it out maybe a little bit. It's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And then we also have our own dairy farm. So our Creekside Dairy is our family farm. Owned and operated by my husband and myself. We have a few part-time employees for that as well. And we milk about 100 brown Swiss cows. So we have the prettiest cows in the valley, we like to say. They've got the big fuzzy ears, the white muzzles. They're full of vim and pep, and they're just really affectionate, really, really intelligent cows. They can be a bit stubborn. You definitely have to learn how to work with them, but we really like the breed, and their milk is really well suited to cheese making. So we actually didn't know that when we started switching to brown Swiss. It was just more from a management standpoint. We wanted a cow that would be healthier, spend a longer time in the herd, easier calving ability. So that was why we actually had switched to brown Swiss. And then when we were looking at cheese making, we were speaking to other cheesemakers, and they kind of were flabbergasted that we were sitting on this gold mine of cheese milk and we didn't even know it. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we've been farming in our current location here for since 2011, so almost 13 years now. We became certified organic in 2012. It was we had been farming organically long before that. And our nutritionist at the time, our cattle feed nutritionist, was also an organic farmer. And he noticed that we were doing all these organic practices. And he said, well, why don't you actually just get the certification and actually get paid for what you're doing? So we did that. And then we really, I guess you could almost say fell in love with organic farming, fell in love with the thought of feeding the soil, feeding the bugs in the soil rather than feeding the crop, and just noticed the increase in biodiversity on the farm, the increase in cattle health. Even just like one tiny measurement is the quality of milk. They measure the somatic cell count, which is a measure of inflammation in the udder, and that's plummeted over the years. We were often up on the high end of the scale before we were organic, and now we're like under 100,000, which is a really, really good score. Even if you were using
really
antibiotics or something like that, you often don't get to that. So, so we've just really fallen in love with the organic way of farming. It's really well suited to how we like to treat our cows and have our cows live. And so I started sharing about our life on the farm, about our cows, about what we do on the farm in 2014 on social media. It's kind of a creative outlet for me. I only had 3 kids at the time, so I felt like I had a little bit of spare time.
Yeah.
And just a nice way to connect with people off the farm. I mean, as much as we love the farm, sometimes it can be a little bit isolating, especially if you're spending every day, all day, just with your animals and your family. And it was just a nice way to branch out, use my creative talents. I've always loved to write. And it was really surprising how many people had an appetite for fresh from the farm information. So that following grew. We had a bunch of posts go viral, brought a lot of opportunities along the way. I was able to talk to different government officials. We did some interviews on national TV, things like that. But what we really started to hear was people starting to like us and know what we were about, and they trusted us, and they really wanted to be able to buy dairy directly from us. And now in BC, most dairy is produced on the farm, picked up by those big bulk tanker trucks you see driving down the road, and brought to the big processing plants in the city. So you can never know where your milk is going. Our customers or any consumer in the province, when they're purchasing milk in the grocery store, can come from many, many different farms. It's all commingled at the plant. You don't know where it's from. And all Canadian dairy farms, all BC dairy farms are held to the same quality standards, animal welfare standards. So it's not that you're getting a bad product, but for people that are really interested in knowing where their food comes from, knowing their farmer, it's hard to make that connection.
Yeah.
But there are ways that you can do that. Within the province of BC, I think there's 17 or 18. Now, don't quote me on that because I'm not entirely sure how many there are. Farmer processors. So they're taking milk from their own farm and they are using it to either make cheese, sell fluid milk, ice cream, those sorts of things. So we knew that was a possibility. But Cecily, you've been to our farm. You know that we're pretty far out there. We're not like on a busy thoroughfare. We're 10 minutes out of the town of Agassiz itself, and Agassiz is not super big. And we just kind of thought that no one would come out to the farm to buy dairy products from us. Yeah. So it was kind of something we just had in the back burner. We thought, maybe someday we'll open a store in Agassiz or something like that. Or we even looked at bringing bottled milk to the farm and maybe having farm tours. Then people could buy milk from one of our processors, something like that. And then we had a bunch of extra beef. So we put that on our town Facebook page and I said, hey, Saturday we'll be around if you want to stop by for beef. We've got 2 freezers of beef here, just fresh from the farm, some bull calves that we raised as steers. And we had a lineup out the door.
Yeah. I got a little worried actually because I was buying beef from you before. I think you started opening it up to town, and this was before we were raising our own beef as well. But as soon as I saw how many people were coming, I'm like, oh my goodness, my beef supply could be in jeopardy here. Because it was so good. And like you said, I've been to your farm. We've done field trips at your farm. You're actually where I buy my milk. And I don't know, I just love the way you guys do things so much. So, and you know what, being out of town is, I think in some ways, it's a drawback, especially when you're trying to decide if you're going to take that big step and open this business that's going to cost you all sorts of money just to even get going. But where you guys live, I mean, I live in a beautiful part of our little valley here, but you live in a really beautiful part of our little valley.
It's a little piece of paradise.
It is. And just this certain angle of the mountains that you guys get there. And every time I drive out to your place, I end up taking pictures. It's like, I don't just go to get milk. I go to like take in the scenery, even though I've seen it 100 times, or not more than that, 1,000 times before, just because it's so gorgeous. And I think like when we're trying to connect with our local farmer, that's part of the beauty of it, right? Is just slowing down and enjoying what God has put all around us. And yeah. So I think I was listening to something the other day and it was talking about how like for us, at least in BC, and I think it's the same for most Americans, if you're drinking a glass of milk, that milk could be, however many thousands of cows just in that one glass of milk. And when we get milk from you, it's like we've seen the faces of these cows and we know exactly where our milk is coming from. So it's a big thing. And you said you noticed even back in 2014 when you started sharing that there was an appetite for people to know where their food was coming from. I think that's even growing, like here we are 10 years later. And I think people are kind of starting to wake up to the fact that, hey, it's important to have some knowledge about our food supply and to know where we can get food locally. And like you said, the soil, all of that is so important. And to have farmers that are paying attention to that is huge. And I think the average consumer is starting to wake up to that. So, I mean, when you think of you just kind of started writing 10 years ago, never thought much of it. But it's actually done a huge service because you're one of those first people, at least in this area, to be like, hey, this is what farming can look like. And this is what's happening. And this is why it's good. And this is how it leads to flourishing for the animals, for people, for communities. So very well done. And I don't know if you have more that you wanted to say about your farm or your family or if
and then we were kind of talking about the beef. And then so that also then led to more questions about the dairy. So that was when we really started to think, hey, people are definitely willing to come out. They are still very interested in dairy as well. Let's look more into this. So we visited a bunch of cheese plants, a bunch of small dairy plants, and then had the opportunity to purchase some cheese processing equipment from a cheesemaker up in Quesnel, so about 5 hours from us. We actually signed the sale contract on the day that everything stopped for COVID. We were driving up on the highway to Quesnel. There's no one on the roads. And we're like, what are we even doing? What's going to be happening in the next little bit? Is this the stupidest thing we've ever done? Or is it? Man. Yeah. So we, giant leap of faith, a lot of prayer going into that. Is this the right thing? Should we be doing this? And we both really felt led to that. So, made that decision, started building our little cheese shop here on the farm. And opened the doors in August of 2021. And to this same welcome that we had with the beef, we had people lining up out the door. And that first weekend, we ran out of cheese. So it was really an answer to prayer because we had made this giant leap of faith, and then to know that yes, it was the right decision in the time, and we were correct in feeling led to that, we process milk twice a week. So we make cheese twice a week. We have the on-farm milk dispenser that Cecily was talking about. That's a huge draw. It brings our customers back every week, get their fresh milk. The kids love it. We always joke with the kids like that visit the farm that's on the other side of the wall is the dairy cow. It's as fresh as it gets. And they all know because they've all been to the barns. They've seen the cows out there. So they know we're pulling their leg. And it's just, it's such a fun experience just seeing the awe, the wonder, especially when we're doing our guided farm tours. Some of these kids have never seen a cow before. The parents have never really thought about the process of getting the milk from the cow into their fridge. And it's a wonderful experience to help them make that connection. We really love that part of it.
So good.
Well, I think like the COVID situation probably made your situation opening this farm, like it turns out there couldn't have been a better choice for you, right? Because people really had trouble getting things that they needed, one, but also it drove people to really start caring about, hey, we need to be involved in this process too, because look, our government doesn't have the best interests of, have our best interests in mind. And people really started, I think, seeing that. So they wanted to be connected to their food. But what you're describing, I think there is a draw to that now, more and more, but so many people live urban and there is no way really for them to be connected to their food at all. So really through this series, we're wanting to help people really understand different perspectives of farming from different angles. And we really wanted to get some dairy on here. And we're glad that we have a couple of people to share. Because I think that in wellness circles, specifically driven by the COVID scenario, the push has been for raw milk, especially those who follow the Weston Price model. And while I do source raw milk for my family, for me, homogenization and the structural changes has always been more of a draw to me than the pasteurization standpoint. Yeah. And so can you speak to people? That's one of the concerns for me. And then also, well, let's just talk about that first, pasteurization and homogenization and what the differences are, because I don't think a lot of people even know that there's a difference or those are two separate
really
things.
Great question. Yeah, two totally different things. So pasteurization is the process of heating milk up to a certain temperature to kill any potentially harmful bacteria that could be in the milk. So on a small dairy plant like ours, we do the lowest allowable temperature, which is 63 degrees Celsius. I believe that's 145 Fahrenheit. You hold it there for 30 minutes and then cool it down again. So that's going to kill any potentially harmful bacteria. But it does leave many of the enzymes intact. Now, pasteurization itself, of course, for people that want raw milk, that can be a drawback already. And I get it. I mean, we drink raw milk from our herd. The kids prefer it. And we are exposed to all of the different bacteria on our farm all the time. So we have our strong microbiome that's adapted to that. And we, like Cecily has said too, our farm is really clean. So we take really good care to make sure our farm and our animals are really clean when we're milking them, that there's no manure getting into the milk. And if you don't have that connection with your farmer, you don't know their practices, you could be ingesting some potentially harmful stuff, which is part of the reason why pasteurization came into place. But it did also come into place at a time when there wasn't nearly the same advances in technology for cooling, for filtering, or anything like that as well. So I do hope that one day there can be a process that would allow for regulated raw milk sales here in our province. And I say regulated as in to follow really strict standards as for milk quality and for food safety.
But legal.
So that being said,
would be amazing.
It would be really nice to be able to do it legally for sure. That being said, so that's pasteurization. There are two levels, sometimes three levels of pasteurization. There's the vat pasteurization, which is the low temperature pasteurization we do. And there's the high temperature short time pasteurization, which raises the temperature another 10, 15 degrees, but does it for a shorter amount of time. It does impact the enzymes quite a bit more. And then there's UHT, which is ultra high temperature pasteurization, which basically kills the milk and makes it shelf stable. It doesn't even need to go in the fridge.
Yeah.
So there's those three levels.
And can I ask which question about that?
Yes.
So I think you said the ultra high temp or ultra pasteurization.
Yeah.
Is that
ultra high temp? Yeah.
Okay. Is that what like most processors would do? Like, so if I went to the store and grabbed like Dairyland milk or something, do you think that would be the high temp short time or
high temp short time? Yeah. Anything in the fridge of your grocery stores would be high temp short time. Fridge space is a valuable commodity in grocery stores. So if it's at all possible for that to be on the shelf, that would be ultra high temp stuff that would be on the shelf, not in the fridge then, because their fridge space is valuable for them.
Because even the milk, like if I were to pick some up in the store, which I've done on occasion, it lasts a surprisingly long amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of course they're killing more of those, the good bacteria and also the enzymes, which will break down normally over a period of time in your vat pasteurization. But they've been denatured already with the regular pasteurization.
Because I was saying to someone just the other day, I'm like, when I get my milk from Creekside, it goes bad faster, which I consider it a plus. And it like, I consider that a good thing.
You get about a week to 10 days and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of starting. Whereas, milk that I buy out of the fridge at the store, it's like 2 weeks, maybe even longer, maybe even 3 weeks. Even
3 weeks, I think sometimes. Yeah.
Even because even the expiration date is out there. And I'm like, that's a long time for milk.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I appreciate yours going bad a little faster.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the homogenization process. So that is when you're taking the whole milk and they push it through a really fine filter at a very high pressure. Mm-hmm. So that breaks up those fat globules in the milk so that they are evenly dispersed through the milk. And because they're so tiny and broken, they don't actually clump together anymore to form cream and rise to the top of the milk. They'll actually just stay homogeneous mixture throughout the milk and remain suspended in the milk. So it's convenience for the most part. People wouldn't know what they were seeing if they saw a line on their milk in their fridge for the most part. We're thankful we have customers that realize how valuable that cream is and how beautiful it is to see that cream line, because that's showing that the milk is not altered in that way. A lot of people have issues digesting homogenized milk. I've read of a very strong link between homogenization and leaky gut syndrome. So we're really happy that it's not a forced practice at all. It's very much allowed to use a cream top milk. And there are some bigger processors like Happy Planet Creamery that still do a cream top as well, just because there are people out there that are really looking for that. So for us, we never skim any of the milk. So whatever the cows are producing for butterfat is what you're going to find on your milk. So right now the cows just went out to pasture, and depending on the growth stage of the pasture, the cows will produce a different amount of butterfat. So we've actually noticed it going up right now. The last butterfat test was 4.83%. So you're going to get a really nice layer of fat on your milk. So,
I love that.
You can use your coffee or shake it back into the milk so it's nice and rich. It's totally really nice that way.
I love a cream line. I actually, taking that off. I take pictures when it's like a beautiful cream line. I'm like, oh, that deserves a picture. And not everyone gets that, but it's a beautiful thing. I've used your milk to make butter. Like when there's a lot of cream on it, I just make my own butter. I'll usually buy like 2 gallons at a time or 1.5 gallons, and one's for drinking, one's for making yogurt. Like it's just beautiful milk. So yeah, I thank you for explaining that.
It's pretty getting that cream line on the top of your milk.
It is.
So when you go to the store, like people who are buying milk at the supermarket, they're getting, skim milk, 2% or whole milk. And it's not, I think that there's a little bit of a misconception of how that milk is whole milk, 2% skim milk. Can you kind of explain how they do that? Yeah. Whereas like somebody's coming and buying milk from you, they're just getting what the cow produced.
Yeah. So if in a large dairy plant, when the milk starts going through the whole process of pasteurization, homogenization, they're also skimming all of the fat off the milk. So it's a very fast spinning skimmer, I guess they call it. It's usually a series of plates that the fat goes to the top, the skim goes to the bottom, and then it's completely 0% fat. You're left with your skim milk and then your full fat cream. From there, it goes through a standardization process. So depending on what sort of milk they're bottling that day, if it's 1%, they're adding a certain amount of cream back into the milk. If it's a 2%, again, a little bit more. And then usually the highest percentage would be 3.25. And then they're adding a little bit more again. And then, of course, if they're making table cream or half and half cream, then they're adding some skim to the cream. So it's they do all their calculations to figure out exactly what volume they need and then add a certain amount back. So on our farm, like you said, the cows are producing 4.83% butterfat right now. In the fall, it was 4.2% butterfat. So our customers know that it's always going to fluctuate naturally with the seasons, with what the cows are eating and all that kind of stuff.
I wonder if now's actually a good time to talk a little bit about what your cows eat. Yeah. Okay.
So we follow the Canadian grass-fed standards for producing for dairy cattle. So unlike beef that can survive on just grass. It is very hard for a dairy cow to produce a normal amount of milk when they're only eating grass and not have any grain supplement. So there is an allowance for a percentage of concentrate, they call it. So that would be your grains, your pulses, that sort of thing that you add back into the mix that you're feeding your cows. So our cows are fed grass out in the pasture when they're eating in pasture, usually from April through October. And then during the summer, we're also harvesting grass from off of our fields, either as silage or as hay. So that makes up the huge bulk of their diet. So either it's fresh in the summer or ensiled or dried for winter use. And then we add a little bit of ground peas and ground barley, as well as a vitamin and mineral mixture that our nutritionist has formulated. So our diet is super simple. I mean, we get 2 commodities in plus some bags of this mineral mixture. That's all certified organic. And so we mix it in our big KitchenAid behind the tractor mixer. It's like a big tub that spins around and chops it all up. And then we feed it out to the cows year round because they need that grain year round. So in the morning before they go out to pasture, they can have some. And then when they come in for milking again, and then in the winter, that's what their entire diet is made up of. And of course, because we're certified organic, all of the feeds, so the barley and the peas that we're buying are certified organic as well. Okay.
So do your cows eat corn at all?
No.
Okay.
No, we used to grow corn for feeding to the cows. It's difficult to grow corn organically and control the weeds. You do a lot of tillage. We're really trying to get away from tillage and to become more of a perennial have a perennial crop rotation with like many years in between to really build that soil life. So it was just a management decision, but also more of an ethos decision to really focus on soil life. So no corn at all. And just the peas and the barley added to the grass.
I love that. And as you know, we live in the same area. This place is loaded with cow corn around here. So I'm certainly no expert. I did grow up on a dairy farm, but I wasn't really paying attention to how things worked back then. But most cows do get quite a lot of corn silage, right?
Yeah, it's become quite a monocrop practice now. So the farmers will grow corn through the summer, and then most will put a cover crop in through the fall, and then that will be their grass crop that they'll feed in conjunction with the corn. The last few winters have been very tough for growing cover crop. The first year was too dry, and then last year got really cold and a lot of cover crop died. So a lot of these cows are going to be being fed mostly corn, and a lot of farmers do feed mostly corn with a little bit of hay and then their grains in addition to that as well.
And would there...
It's very much a corn heavy diet for the conventional dairy herds.
That's kind of the impression I got. And as far as like peas and barley, do you think conventional herds get that sort of thing, or is that really more just organic?
Barley is pretty common.
Okay.
Peas, not so much. For some reason, our brown Swiss cows do really well on that. They produce good amount of milk. The protein actually isn't as high as like say a canola or a flax. But it really works well for our cows, and it's a lot cheaper than those really high value, high protein crops. So that works out well for us.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
And I guess I can go a little bit deeper into that too, because we're feeding only grass. So cows produce milk from starch, but also from protein, and protein can be hard to come by in an economical way. Like your flax and your canola are really high value crops. So because we're not feeding corn silage, which is a low protein crop, and grass, which is a higher protein crop, we don't have to supplement as much protein. So the peas are just like that perfect amount of protein and starch for us. So
that's awesome. Very interesting.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
So I would say the other thing that I think it is a concern, and I don't even know if I should say concern for me, but it's something I think we definitely should be thinking about and is overlooked in the milk conversations that I find on social media is hormones and breeding practices. So I know RBST was a thing like maybe in the 90s, and still you can find labeling here in America that says, this milk was not produced with RBST, but I don't think really a lot of farmers are using that anymore anyway. No. But the hormone concern I have is with cycle synchronization, one, and then embryo transfer is being used increasingly. And I think that that's skyrocketing here in America. I'm not sure, but basically embryo transfer is like IVF. And then to put it in layman's terms, I guess IVF and surrogacy, what you would consider that in humans, right? So
yes,
I don't know
exactly.
if you can, okay, if you can talk about that just a little bit. And am I wrong to be concerned about that, I guess?
I don't know if there's reason for concern.
Yeah.
It's not how we choose to farm.
Okay.
So we do bull breeding. So when a cow is in heat and she's had a calf like 4 or 5 months ago, and then it's time for her to go to be bred again, she just has a visit with the bull. He takes care of the job. There's no hormones. There's none of that besides the natural stuff going on.
That's rare.
It fits really well with how we farm, just very low intervention, I guess you'd say. And those breeding hormones are only allowed to be used in organic farming when there's a documented problem with the cow. Like say you've had the vet out and like this cow is not cycling. So they'll write a prescription actually to inject the cow with a hormone that will make her come back into heat, and then she can be bred. We've never really gone that route. We kind of feel that if a cow is not cycling and not coming into heat, then maybe it's time for her to leave the farm, because we don't really want those genetics passed on to offspring. We want a cow that's going to be problem-free, low maintenance, and not require any of those interventions. So we've kind of weeded out that problem from our own herd anyways. But on conventional dairy farms, especially large conventional dairy farms, the off-sync programs, which is, like you said, the synchronized breeding is very big. So they'll have a specific day of the week that they breed cows, but in order to know which cows to breed, they are giving them a course of different hormones to bring them into heat all on that day so that they can breed them with bull semen that's been harvested by semen companies, and then they artificially inseminate that cow. So I think for the most part, it's done to reduce the workload on the farm. So you have one specific day for breeding. You're not looking for cows in heat all through the barns and then having to sort and all that kind of stuff. That kind of takes some of those steps out of the way. But every cow in that herd, or certain cows in that herd, are always being injected with hormones to bring on a heat in order for them to become pregnant. So it's just a matter of course rather than allowing nature to do its thing. So,
okay, go ahead.
And then you talked about also the embryo transfer. Yeah. So that's, I'm not as familiar with that, but I do know there's a lot of hormones involved with causing the cow to release a certain number of eggs, as many eggs as possible, to make it more financially viable. And then those eggs are harvested and they are fertilized and then placed in the uteruses of different cows. So as the surrogate again, so they're, by doing so, they're able to match certain cows with certain bulls. And if it's a very valuable cow, they're not subjecting her to a pregnancy where she could potentially die or have health issues because of that. So these very valuable cows are being spared that, I guess. But
wow,
I don't have strong opinions on it. It's not something we would ever want to do on our farm at all. It's not how we farm. I understand why farmers do it. And I don't think consumers know very much about it or even are aware that this is going on
at all, unless they have like an agricultural background. That's the only way I know about it, is from, learning about this from being exposed to farming at a young age. And my concern is less with, I know our listeners will hear this and maybe their concern will be ethics, and the ethics of how, these cows are being handled and things. My concern, I guess, and I shouldn't say concern again, because I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking about the hormones that are being used because, when these cows are coming back,
estrogen, progesterone.
Yeah. Because there's been discussion of dairy being linked to some of these early puberty in young girls and things like that. And I don't know for sure, but I know when that enters the discussion, this is what I think about when it comes to dairy. I don't think necessarily about the RBST because I don't think that's being used anymore widely, but I think about this and I don't know that is a problem, but I know that there's a reason to consider it as a problem, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask before was, you know, as consumers, at least in Canada, I don't know about in the US, but we're very much kind of reassured all the time. There's no hormones used in Canadian milk or
growth hormones. That's the growth hormones, but they will say hormones.
They say hormones. Like it's very misleading.
Yes. It's a blanket statement and it doesn't actually apply. Yes, growth hormones are not used in dairy in Canada. Never has been permitted, the RBST. But in beef, growth hormones are used and not in chicken. But consumers, if they see a blanket statement of hormones, they're thinking growth hormones. They're not thinking about the other hormones that are used and that they are widely used.
Yeah. And I think even with beef, like with the growth hormones, I think a lot of Canadians also assume that there's no hormones used. But that's a wrong assumption. Correct.
It is. Yeah. I don't know. In beef, I'm not sure how prevalent it is. It apparently allows them to process their feed more efficiently, so they grow faster. It's usually, I think it's an implant in the ear of the beef animal. There is definitely hormone-free beef. You see that advertised a lot, and so that wouldn't have the growth hormones. But yeah, for dairy, we've kind of used the blanket statement, no hormones used, but that's only applies to growth hormones.
Very interesting. See, that marketing is always just... That's what gets me, you know, it's like, it's all good if we're honest, but you know, because then consumers can really truly choose. But when there's dishonest marketing, I feel like that kind of gets taken out of the consumer's hand unless they are really invested in doing their own research, which not a lot of people are.
No, I know. And they don't think they have to because they've been told it's fine, and they don't think there's any reason for them to be concerned. So if it has an impact on puberty or anything else like that, I really don't know.
Right. I don't
know
either.
There's hormones in many different foods. I've even read like cabbage has tons of estrogen in it. So if that has an impact on puberty, I really don't know. Yeah.
Everyone's like downing their sauerkraut, not realizing.
Like having a discussion about some of the ways we're doing these things, right? Like so people know and they can look into it themselves and make a decision, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's where the know your farmer, know your food really comes into play for anybody that's really interested in what they're eating and how it's produced. It's always best to go to the source if you can.
Absolutely. Okay. I don't know what else is on our list to ask her, but maybe we could talk about quota for a second.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to explain, because I think a lot of Americans maybe would not even be familiar with what is the quota system that we have, not only for milk, but we have it for like eggs and meat and all sorts, not beef, I don't think, but like chicken meat.
Chicken meat.
So what is the quota system, first of all? Maybe it's not fair to ask if you like it or if you don't, maybe pros and cons.
There's pros and cons. Yeah.
Okay. Discuss.
Yeah. So yes, discuss. The quota system in Canada, supply management, has long been the subject of a lot of controversy. So when the quota system in Canada was brought in place, it was done to manage supply and demand to alleviate food waste. So the goal of supply management is to always match the amount of milk or chicken or egg produced to meet the demand of Canadian consumers. So we produce what we need to use here in Canada with very little export. On the flip side of that, the farmers that are farming under the supply management system are paid according to the cost of production. So whatever it's costing to produce a liter of milk, produce a dozen eggs, I don't know if it goes by dozens or one chicken, that is taken into consideration when they adjust what farmers are paid every year. It also takes into account the consumer price index. If all foods are increasing, then dairy will kind of follow that same trajectory. And it's not that they're paying you much above that cost of production. So you have to be an efficient, well-managed farm in order to make an income or even have a profit. So it's definitely not like a guaranteed income. If your cows would get sick and you would start suddenly produce way less milk, you only get produced for the milk you're producing. You don't get like a standard paycheck every month. It's very much based on what your farm is producing. So
you're still paying that quota cost for the higher amount.
So in order to be involved in the supply management system, you have to buy quota, which allows you to produce a certain amount of milk, amount of chicken, amount of eggs. And that value has really, really increased over the time that the supply management has been in place. Currently here in BC, I think it's around $34,000 per kilo of butter fat. So that's about one, on our farm, it's 1 cow's worth of butter fat. On farms that have a lot of production or higher producing cows, it's almost half a cow's worth of production. So we have about 95 kilos of butter fat quota on our farm, and we're milking about 100 cows. So kind of, if that makes that. So if you do the math, it's a lot of money tied up in the quota.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now they say that's not figured into the cost of production because the cost of quota actually varies all across Canada. So that the cost of quota is not figured into the cost of production. That has to be managed from your own revenue.
Okay.
Sorry, Rita.
It's okay. We have like a whole lot of Americans listening to this that don't understand quota at all. So I just want to clarify. You're buying what you're going to produce from the government. Like the government.
Yes, it's like a license to produce a certain amount of milk from the government. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's managed by the Canadian government, by the CDC, the Canadian Dairy Commission.
Okay.
All right.
So yeah. Another question. You said you have about 95 kilos of quota on your farm, right? And
yes, that's right.
So if you had bought that quota at today's current rate of around 34,000 a kilo, just so that people can understand, that's worth $3,230,000, that quota.
Yes.
That
exactly.
is mind-boggling.
Yes. We have a very, very hefty mortgage.
You would have to. Yeah.
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 So you pay the government $3 million or whatever so that you can produce this milk, and then you get paid from the government, or who's paying you then?
Yeah. So that's managed provincially. So we get paid by the BC Milk Marketing Board. So that has directive from the provincial government then. So that's, they definitely have provincial government directive for that, but it's a board of directors that are mostly dairy farmers and some outside as well, a very large staff that takes care of all of the calculations of how much milk each farm has produced, how much butter fat, how much protein, all of that. And then you are paid based on those components.
Okay. So say Cecily comes to your store and buys milk. Is she paying you, or is she paying the like, how does this work?
Yeah. So for independent processors like us, farmer processors, we actually sell the milk on paper that we use in the cheese plant. So the farm sells the milk to the BC Milk Marketing Board, and then the cheese plant, the creamery, buys the milk back from the BC Milk Marketing Board. Even though it never changes hands, it goes directly from the bulk tank into our cheese vat. And that is done to still manage the supply and demand. So if we were still under that quota system as well.
This is a lot. So you're
because say we had wanted to start a cheese plant, we didn't have any quota, and we decided we're going to milk 1,000 cows and we're going to make lots of cheese. It's going to disrupt the balance of supply and demand. So that's why all dairy farms and all cheese plants, all processors are under the same system.
But there is no supply and demand if the government's saying what the demand is. I mean, right?
They look at how much is produced and how much butter stock there is stored. So there is definitely calculations that are done to know if there's a shortfall or a surplus. And we've had quota taken away when there's been too much milk on the market.
So when they take your quota away, do they then give you the money back?
No.
What?
No. If demand for milk in Canada decreases, then a quota reduction will be issued. So that means all farms across Canada have to produce less milk. So that is done to eliminate food waste. But in that sort of a situation where it's actually the real demand for milk for Canadian consumers has decreased, farmers are not compensated from what I have ever known. But if quota or market access is given away through a trade deal, like we had with the new NAFTA agreement, the CUSMA agreement, Then typically there is some sort of compensation for farmers for the value of the quota that they will notice a decrease on their farms over time. So they put an arbitrary number on it usually, and then each farm gets a one-time check, or sometimes it's paid over a few installments to make up for that loss of market share. So in a country like the United States that doesn't have supply management, if there is overproduction, they're looking for outside markets to ship that milk to. So they're shipping it around the world. And Canada is a really great place to ship it to because we're very close. So milk is perishable. So if they can ship fluid milk even across the border, that's very, it would be a good way for them to manage overproduction. In Canada, we manage overproduction more at the farm level. So if we're producing too much milk on our farm, then we're going to maybe change the way we feed our cows, or maybe get rid of a few cows that we've decided that we don't really want to have in the herd anymore. Maybe their genetics aren't great or something like that. But it kind of takes the freedom out of it for the farmers to produce as much as they want when they want to. And we're seeing that now on the cheese plant side of things. That right now we're processing about 1/3 of our cow's milk here in the cheese plant. The rest still goes on the bulk tanker truck and it goes off to the processor. But say demand grows so much that we have maxed out the amount of milk that we produce on the farm here, and we need more. We would have to purchase quota on the farm side to get more of that milk, because we are very much a single source. We want milk that's produced exactly to the same standards that we do here. But even just how the breed of the cows, how we feed the cows, that all impacts the final product. So we want exactly the same product to be used for our cheese. So ideally, we'd just like to be able to milk more cows, or maybe our oldest will be old enough. He would love to farm one day, that he could start up a farm the same way we do. And we could just bring that milk in. But that's very difficult under supply management. So I do understand like both sides of it very well, probably more so. But I would say I'm still a supporter of supply management because it keeps small family farms like ours viable with that guaranteed cost of production covered by your milk check. And no outside pressure from, I'll just say like the United States or New Zealand that can produce huge amounts of milk much more economically due to climate, due to economies of scale, a lot of foreign workers that with lower minimum wage. There's just a lot of variables there that allow different countries to produce milk at a lower cost. And as a huge proponent of local food, I want to see as many local dairy farms stay in Canada as possible without being flooded out by imported milk.
See, I can see your point there a little bit from the standpoint of the small farm, because yes, the small dairies have gone away substantially in America, but I still it sounds like Cecily and I had talked about before this, it sounds like a socialist system, and I'm against those socialist systems and government having their hand in our food. I think a better way is just educating the public. And like you said at the beginning, I think people are more so wanting those small farms. And that's coming back in America in a small way right now, but I think can come back more as people become more educated and we as consumers create the demand for it, So.
Yeah, and I know now that we do process our own milk, the fear of supply management one day not being around anymore, that's gone. It would actually create more opportunity for us without supply management. But I just really feel for our fellow farmers if that would be the case. Yeah.
Another question, doesn't it sort of put you on a fixed income? Because there's a couple questions I have here. Does it kind of put you on a fixed income because you can't really export milk? I was reading an article about it that basically said, it says within Canada, some groups say supply management prevents the country from becoming a dairy exporting power. With grain and meat also, it says they argue that severely restricting imports results in higher Canadian food prices because there can't be a greater supply. And so because of the management, it kind of
some of those articles can be a little biased that way. because of our climate, we're not a huge dairy producing country. I don't think we ever will be. It would be nice to be able to export like some skim milk powder, some of the excess stuff. There's a huge demand for butterfat, but we have a hard time getting rid of the skim milk that's created from that. So to become a dairy export powerhouse, I don't think that's ever going to be in the cards for Canada with or without supply management. And as for the food prices being more expensive because of the import taxes, the US, other countries, they all have some tariffs on imports. Canada's are higher, but we've signed trade agreements now with many European countries, with the US, that allow in a huge amount of tariff-free product. So even if you go to like a specialty cheese shop and you see the imported cheese, it's actually sold at a way lower cost than the Canadian stuff, because often they are subsidized in their own country and are able to ship it across at ridiculously low prices. Even if you look at Costco, like if you see like a good Gruyere there, it's like $22 a kilo. I can't imagine how they can produce it for that low of a cost. So I don't think it really drives up the cost of food. And I was actually just in Bellingham a few weeks ago and I was comparing milk prices there. They're slightly lower, but nothing significant, maybe like 30 cents over on a gallon jug.
Yeah. Bellingham, Washington, just in case anyone's not clear. Yeah. Sorry, how much was it per gallon?
About 30 cents per jug. Yeah.
Less.
Yeah, and the organic milk was exactly the same price as in Canada.
Okay. Interesting.
So
it's good to hear the pros and cons, because I've always grown up with farmers who have always, for the most part, I think have seen the pros and cons as well, but have really relied on supply management in order to stay functioning.
Yes.
But there's always been something about it to me too that was like, oh, it just feels like something's like not quite right about it.
It is. It is, like you said, a socialist system, right?
Yeah. And that's what it is, I guess. That doesn't go.
And that's why you'll notice like the Conservative government, the People's Party of Canada the Conservative government supports it to a certain extent, or the Conservative Party, the People's Party would abolish it if they could. Right. And that's going again with the being on the conservative side of the economic spectrum then.
So how does it work also if somebody wants to start farming or start a dairy?
There actually are really good programs for that.
Wait, hang on.
New entrant programs. Yes.
The second part of my question with that is not like how the program works. How does that work if somebody's buying in quota? Doesn't that take from another farmer? For another farmer to start up, somebody else has to lose.
Yeah. So it's twofold the way that grows. So if, say, someone wanted to increase their farm size or start dairy farming, there's farms going out of business selling their quota so that you can purchase that. But also any growth in demand within the country results in a quota adjustment. So that would put more quota into the marketplace. That is a percentage of that is always put aside for new entrants. So there's each province has a new entrant program where they give quota to aspiring farmers, and after a certain number of years, they own it. And that's how it keeps the vitality of the industry alive.
This is so interesting.
Yeah. It is. I feel like I've learned a lot more about it. Like I've always just known about the periphery of it. So this is very interesting. Yeah.
Definitely not sold on it by any means as an American. But we have major problems in how our government has their hand in our farming practices also. So I'm just all for government removing themselves from it.
Well, this is one thing that we wanted this series on like food supply and agriculture to highlight is the pros and cons, and how there's like at least two sides to everything, right? Yeah. And to really be able to be an informed consumer, you have to understand the differing perspectives and why things are done the way they are in any
and then the ramifications of not having those systems in place too.
Yeah, because there's always going to be fallback. Like Rita and I have talked a lot about different types of farming. And of course, we have these wonderful ideas of like, wouldn't it be great if this was all like that? However, we've talked about like to actually get there is another thing, right? Like there's going to be huge like say the supply management was to just be stopped. Well, there'd be huge ramifications and it would take a long time. It would probably correct eventually. In some way, but it would take a long time. It would be incredibly painful.
It would really change it would change the landscape of the rural landscape in Canada for sure. Yeah.
Same thing with any type of farming, like to make like, if everyone had to make like the big change right away, it would be like almost impossible.
Everybody had to farm organically next year, right? They would just, it has to be baby steps for sure.
Absolutely. Which is, I don't know, that's one thing we just really wanted to highlight on this was like, yeah, we have like our ideals of like what is the way we want it to be. And we can do our best to shop that way and to source things that way while realizing that not everything can be that way, especially right away. So,
and consumer support for those practices, that is going to be the driver for people to change because they're going to see the demand for that. Farmers, we're business people too. We know when there is a demand for a certain type of product. And if that demand makes sense for us and it makes sense for us to change our practices to fill that demand, we'll do that. I mean, that's what we did when we became organic. That was a big part of it too. We knew there was a market for it and people were interested in supporting that kind of farming. So it really helped us to make that decision to pursue certification as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that people can easily forget if they're not surrounded by farmers, is that farmers are business people. But what I love about what you've done is you've found a way to marry like that entrepreneurial spirit with your values and, you know, like passion. You've managed. Yeah. Like, I think that's a really cool thing. I don't know. It's just rare. So I love that you've done that. And I love that you're local to me so that I can enjoy the benefits of that.
Yeah. I think that's what makes it so fun for us too. It's yes, it's our business and we're entrepreneurs, but it's still so much that we love the lifestyle. We love working with our animals. And then for me, especially sharing that with our consumers, with the public, that's really what lights my fire.
That's awesome. Right. Rita, is there anything else that you want to ask before we wrap up? Or
I appreciate this conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let our listeners know, because you've talked about how you share about this. So let us know where they can find you on social media or whatever else you got going on.
Yeah, if you're not local to us, you can definitely find us on Facebook and Instagram. I've definitely become more active on Instagram rather than Facebook in the last number of years. So it's just at Creekside Cheese and Creamery. We also have a website, www.creeksidecreamery.ca. A lot of information on there about how we farm, a lot of beautiful pictures of our gorgeous cows. And like Cecily said, the gorgeous landscape here with the mountains. And I try to be on there fairly regularly. Sometimes life gets in the way and I'm not on there as often, but it does really help to drive customers out to the farm as well. So we definitely use it as a business thing, but also just a fun way to connect with everybody.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you again for coming on. We've really appreciated this conversation.
Thanks.
I'm excited to tell you about one of our sponsors, Barn to Door. This series is all about connecting back to your food supply. And the best way to do that is be able to purchase from local farmers, but also for those local farmers to easily be able to sell to you. And Barn to Door makes it so easy for my local farmers to provide me with a great shopping experience. Digging in more after purchasing through Barn to Door, I was intrigued to learn that they actually power thousands of farmers across all 50 states, selling to more than 1 million people, which is awesome. So if you're a farmer looking to improve your brand presence and make it easy for buyers to purchase from you, then go to barntodor.com and learn more. If you're a buyer and you want to purchase from a local farmer, you can go to localfarmfinder.com to discover farmers in your own community. We'll drop the links in the comments and you can shop Barn to Door however you need, if you're a farmer or if you're a purchaser.
This episode is all about dairy. And while not everyone can have their own dairy cow, most people can grow some of their own produce, even if that means some tomatoes and herbs in the window of your apartment. ARC Seed Kits is seeking to help every home in America find more food security. This is a family-owned and operated business out of northern Michigan that prepares seed kits of all heirloom seeds. This is important because heirloom varieties are able to reproduce, ensuring that you'll be able to grow produce for you and your family for years to come. They have put their attention onto packing their seed kits full of nutrient and calorie-dense vegetables and fruit so that you're getting the most out of your garden. In a world that seems increasingly unstable, knowing you will always be able to provide food for your family can bring such peace. There are even many leading economists and investors who believe that heirloom seeds could become a currency of the future. I highly recommend that you give their all-in-one seed kit a look. It's packed with over 50,000 heirloom seeds made up of 65 different varieties, all of which are heirloom. It even has a shelf life of 15 plus years, which is incredible. This is the most affordable way to ensure your family will have the best produce available for years to come. Go to arcseedkits.com or click the link in our show notes and enter the code BOOMCLAP to save 10% off your order. Well, thank you guys for coming on. So Justin, right?
Correct.
And Amber, I'm Cecily. It's nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Rita. I know Amber, but not
Right.
no. I mean, what does that even mean anymore, right?
We're Instagram friends. We know each other.
As much as you can on Instagram. Actually, you know what? Rita and I are Instagram friends too. We've never met in person and we've podcasted for 3 years together.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's impressive.
A little bit crazy.
But you know what is really cool is I feel like I do know Cecily really well, even though we haven't met in person. And even you, Amber, like it just feels very natural to talk to you like this because I feel like I have talked to you in some ways, you know?
Yeah. I feel like you do get to know people in a sense of who they are and their morals and values. And then it makes conversations easy because we've had some deep conversations, even though we've never met.
Yeah,
so
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yep, we have. Yeah. So I guess.
And Justin, we feel like we know you because we've seen you doing all the farm chores.
Because you watched me alive.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, your family's really sweet to watch online and your dairy, starting up your dairy. So how long have you guys been at that actually?
We first started milking a cow.
Milk, or as far as having a cow?
I guess wherever you want to start.
We started with one cow, and that was in 2021. So I guess 3 years, probably about 3 years.
Okay, so I thought you had a cow longer than that. So you guys have done a lot in a short amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It went from one cow to too many cows really fast, which is easy to happen when you like cows. So, yeah. People talk about chicken math, and we had like cow calculus going on over here.
Do you guys have farming backgrounds, either one of you?
I grew up in an Amish Mennonite community and had a lot of relatives that had dairy, but we only ever had horses and beef cattle. So I didn't grow up in the dairy realm, but I did grow up with horses and beef cattle. So
and you probably milk cows. And stuff.
I did milk cows when I was younger.
Yeah. And then
very cool.
And then we just were like 4-H kids in California. We did have a milk goat for a small amount of time, but that's as far as I got in my background. So we were like California girl, Mary's Amish Mennonite background here, and developed this together with his skills and my hobby.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Like the way that you guys found each other. I mean, we don't have a ton of time to talk about that, but just give us a little synopsis. Like, how did the California girl find the is ex-Amish the correct way to say that? I don't know.
Amish background. Like
Amish background.
Yeah,
okay.
Amish background.
I would have never left the Amish myself, but my parents did. So
yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Ex-Amish means you left a
gotcha.
church, like you actually left. So
right. Okay.
I moved from California with my parents when I was like 18, 19. And we moved to this area and lived here for 9 months. And my parents went right back to California. And they were like,
in Tennessee, right? For the listeners,
in Tennessee. Yeah, we're in Tennessee now. So we lived here for 9 months in Tennessee, right next door, close to where he grew up. And then I moved back to California with my family after that little stint. And we had met like a month beforehand. Like all the youth in our church would play volleyball and go to the creek, and it was like summer fun. And we met during that time. And 9 months later, we got married and had a big double wedding in California. My sister actually married his cousin. It's this whole long story. Wow. And so my sister and I moved back here to Tennessee, and we've lived here for 13 years. We've been married 13 years now.
So cool. That's funny because with a guest we just recorded with, I listened to her story and Rita's story because they were actually friends. I'm like, man, that just sounds like such a classic American movie. And I feel like that could also be.
It is. My sister will be like, Amber, that's embarrassing. Don't tell people. But I'm like, hey, it's
That's
like
funny.
a Hallmark show.
It's your story.
Here, so,
Yeah,
it's like a movie right down to like the volleyball at the creek. It's good.
There were so many moments that, they were very much like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, you had the one cow. And so what was your driver for even getting the cow? Was it just wanting to have more natural dairy products for your family? Or did you have it in mind that the cow calculus was going to get a little out of control and that perhaps you were going to start a business? Like, what was the evolution of that?
I'll tell my version, and then if I leave anything out. Well, we traveled a lot. Like, we loved RVing and traveling when our kids were younger. So we did a lot of that. And then 2020 hit and traveling wasn't really an option as much. And our kids were getting older and we wanted some more stability. And so then we kind of went deeper with animals. We just had chickens at that point. We got our first milk goat because I had milk goats as a teen and I like that. And we didn't have a lot of pasture land at this time or fencing. I remember we milked our goat under our garage shop, for a while because we didn't really have a setup or infrastructure. Yeah. And of course, I'm the one that's like, we'll buy this and buy that. And you can just throw up a building and, throw in some fencing, just easy, and he can do anything. Like, he's very hands-on skilled. So in my mind, like, hey, it'll just take a minute to throw up. I've gotten better at realizing the parameters that we have to work in. But so we got the goat, we milked the goat. That was really fun. And then we actually kind of started with wanting to breed specialty breeds of cows. We started with a mini cow breed that we were going to like kind of hobby farm and thought that was our thing. So I like to tell people that are starting out in something, sometimes you have to make some mistakes or experiment with different options before you find like what your passion or strengths are. So we had 6 different cow breeds until we landed on a Jersey because I didn't want to be like, I was like, I want to be different. I want to have something different and unique. I didn't want the standard Jersey milk cow. And then one came up that was available in our area. And I kind of saw cows all over Instagram. This probably was started from seeing other people with cows and thinking that looked amazing. And I really wanted one. I'd always loved cows since I was like 15. There was a cow next door that I loved. And
the cow next door.
Cow next door. I would pass it every day on our walk. We did this walk loop. It was a Brahma cow, which is this really huge breed of cow. And so he's promised me that when we're like in our 50s or 60s, I can get a Brahma cow because they're not practical right now. No. But so, we started with this one cow. We brought her home. We still have her to this day. We milk her still for our herd share. Her name's Picasso because she has a crooked nose. And the problem was she was excellent. She was perfect, like no struggles, so easy. So in my mind, like, oh, all cows are like this. Like this is all cows are perfect and this is easy. Let's get more, which we've learned is not the case. We just got lucky with that first one. And I loved milking her, and we milked twice a day, and it was this really fun family time. And we enjoyed the lifestyle of having a milk cow. And then we had friends and neighbors. We had, of course, too much milk with our one big Jersey cow. And so we were able to start a herd share with just the one cow. So you can have a raw micro dairy with one cow. We probably had 15, 12, maybe 12?
Maybe 10.
10 to 12 people just with one cow that we were able to provide for because we were getting like 6 gallons a day from her. She was a big standard Jersey. And then, I was on Facebook cow groups. Facebook cow groups are not a great place to let your wife hang out.
They'll
we
get
have a lot of jokes. Jokes about that. And there was some awesome cows, and there was obviously a need and a void in our area. And during that, there was like this evolution of really getting involved in the community sufficiency. Like we started to really fall in love with that. We had friends that were great gardeners that we would trade milk for, people that produced their own different products in their lane. And we kind of had this bartering system going on among our circles. And then, of course, our eyes kind of became open to things that we wanted to not be part of and wanted to have that self-sufficiency. And that developed into community sufficiency. And we wanted to be producers and part of that and give back in that way. And cows were something we were doing well with what we had. And so we leaned into that more. And yeah, that's kind of how that started. So we talk about it a lot. Like we love producing and being of need and value to our community in something that our lifestyle allows us to do. Where we're not gardener, like we're that's not our skill. I kill every plant we put in the ground. It's not something that we like enjoy. And so letting some of those things go and staying in our lane and relying on our friends and neighbors has really evolved into this beautiful partnership with that. So
it's really rewarding to know that you're producing a really good quality, healthy food source. Yeah. And so it's rewarding in that area.
Yeah. And it's very cool. Oh, go ahead, Rita.
The moving from like self-sufficiency to community sufficiency, that's really something to think about. But doing a dairy, like that's one of the hardest things you can pick as far as the workload. Like that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
I mean, it looks beautiful online and, you show you make everything look very easy. But I mean, my grandparents had a dairy. I know how much work this is. Like there's no leaving it unless you have somebody to take it over for you. You can't just like drop it for a day.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no, there's definitely been times where we're like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And that's where I think you have to be connected to the bigger purpose of why you are doing it. It's obviously so much more than financial. Like it's not a moneymaker. It's not something that is highly profitable. I think if you worked it very intentionally, it could be something that produces more, but that's not the main driving factor for us. Of course, we have it functioning to where it is profitable, but it wouldn't be able to sustain us on its own. So that's where you kind of go like, what is the why? Why are you doing this? And for us, it's that community sufficiency, filling a void and a need within our circles, and then the lifestyle. Like we really love the fact that it is a lot of work and takes all of us.
Yes, that is awesome.
The other night he was on a hunting trip, so it was just me and the kids, and like, I can't go without my 12-year-old son. Like, he fills such an important void. My 6-year-old was playing with the baby, and I was like, thank you. You are helping so much. And he was very into the fact that he was so needed.
Totally.
And we've talked to the kids before. We were like, do you think we should sell the cows? Like, maybe not do this anymore. And they're immediately like, no. Like, they panic. Like, what? They feel a part of that family unity around a big purpose together. So we really, really like that as well.
Yeah. Well,
it would be, go ahead.
No, you go.
It would be reward versus work, or when she was saying not profitable, it's the amount of work for payment for the amount of time is not, it doesn't add up.
That's what I mean.
It does pay for itself, so to speak, but you have a lot of work to get it.
You could do a lot of other things.
That would make a lot more money for the amount of time.
That are a lot easier and that would make the same amount of work.
But the reward for the amount of work is what is worth it. It's not the payment, it's the reward of bringing good quality products.
Yeah, like it's not a job. This is your life. And I think it really is like such a gift for your kids to be able to be needed in that way and to have such purpose. I mean, there's other ways for kids to be needed and find purpose, but I think this is probably all they know and remember, right? And so they don't have, those hours that a lot of kids would spend on video games or watching TV because they are outside working with their hands and contributing and just feeling such a sense of purpose. I think that is so valuable. And getting back to the community sufficiency, that is such a great concept because I think what a lot of people with a Christian worldview do is we kind of look down on the secular world and the hyper individualism that we see. But that is replicated in a way in Christian circles for people that are like so focused on total self-sufficiency. which is important. Like it does tell us in the Bible, like you have to be able to take care of your family or that's a big problem. But at the same time, community is huge. And that reliance on each other, even when we think of the body of Christ, we need the hands, we need the feet, we need the eyes, we need all of it. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing to be able to contribute in such a way that you're like building up that body and embracing it rather than just being like, you know what, I can do this on my own, even if it's from a Christian perspective rather than that secular perspective, but it can go wrong either way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've often thought about how, so like our community is kind of like an extension of our family, right? And in the biblical times, they had really large, huge families. Like if I had 10 sons, we could do a lot. If I had 10 of him, and you had these huge, huge families and they all lived in the same area, right? And it was a curse for families to be spread apart from each other. And so we don't have that huge family movement anymore the same, some do, but not in that same style, where everyone's working together with one, like to feed ourselves. Like we're all working to feed ourselves. We're all working to better our land and produce more. So in a sense, it's like as a community, we are able to do that. We are able to provide all of the necessary needs. We have people that do pork and beef and milk and eggs and gardening. And then there's people that run the Azure drop so that we can get the grain and sugar. And so I think in the early years, we did try to do self-sufficiency style, not realizing that it wasn't like I want to do it all myself. It was I think I have to do it all myself.
Right. Yeah.
What if I can't go into the grocery store and get eggs? Like, what am I going to do? That kind of, it was more from a panic sense than an intentional sense. And then realizing you burn out really quickly when you're trying to do all the things.
Yeah.
And so it's good to need each other, right? So we're glad to do our part.
Really good point you brought up about the fact that we are spread apart. Families are spread apart now. States, I live in a different state than my parents and my siblings and things. And that is something that I didn't really think about coming into this series on food supply and how that has changed the landscape of how we get our food. That's a really good point.
I see that in his family. So with his Amish background and the Mennonite family, like his dad is one of 9 and he is one of 75 first cousins.
Wow. On one side.
On one side of the family.
Only child.
So just on his dad's side, because that's that Amish and Mennonite families having really huge families. And then when you bring in the Amish aspect, they don't travel. Like they're all in the same area. So in the community that we live in, and he remembers as a little boy, like they'd all grow up doing the sorghum cutting and they had to work together, even as a community with the big families, to make big things happen that provided, right?
Yeah. 100%.
So.
Well, it's similar to a conversation I was having with a friend yesterday. We were just talking about food, and she's actually from Ukraine and has been unhappy with like the Canadian food here. Just the way it's like more processed than what they would have there. And that's been an adjustment for her. But we were talking about how it used to be like decades ago and how you didn't get a day off from like finding your food or growing your food. Like that's just something that every single person had to do in one way or another. You were either trading for food by using your skills, or you were out making sure food happened for your family. It's such a recent thing that we've been able to just take days off from like working for our food. And I think that's something that probably the Amish community understands a whole lot better than the average American or Canadian now.
Yeah. And there's a lot of purpose and joy and fun in that. Like it's a lot of work, but the work is the lifestyle. That's and that gives the kids purpose. That gives us purpose. That gives us our spot in our community of what we're able to give back in. So yeah, that's probably one of the parts of running the dairy that is so much more than the milk, that's so much more than it's the full circle aspect of why and being part of that.
Yeah. When we think about reconnecting with our food supply, I think that will bring some joy back to people, because when you look at a lot of the unhappiness and people being so unsettled spiritually and just all the way around within the world, I think a lot of that comes from the complacency that comes with ease, and how, I mean, we talk about this often, Cecily, how like our basic needs, you know, what we think of as basic needs has kind of evolved, and some of our wants now seem to be needs, and people just seem unsettled. But I think part of that comes from everything's so easy for us now.
Yes. Yeah.
And when things were harder, people seemed a little happier, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The Bible says that you enjoy the sweat of the brow, you know?
Yes.
And so when you're having to milk the cow before you can drink a glass of cold milk, then it's definitely more rewarding.
It's just better, right?
Yeah, it tastes way better.
Tastes better, and it's like a sense of pride.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
And for your kids,
when
see
you
that.
grind and package your meat yourself and realize how much work goes into it. When you slice the package open, you're like, okay, that was really rewarding to be able to take this and use it, you know?
Yeah. Well, and when you think of the amount of work that goes into these things as well, then when you think of what's happening on like a mass scale in the more conventional parts of farming, it's like, obviously it's been systematized and all of that. If systematized is a word, I'm not sure. But when you think of how much work it is actually on an individual basis just to feed your own family, it's actually mind-boggling.
Yeah. So I think you can.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Amber.
Go ahead. I could keep going on and on about it, like the convenience versus.
No, you can elaborate there.
It was even when we were trying a garden and did, because we do a little garden. I just realized there was this click of we lose so much in the convenience that we're seeking, right? So I could go to the grocery store and just put all my produce in a bag or get it delivered. I can't. We live too far out, but you can get delivered to your front door, right? And that seems to be the ideal situation. That's so convenient. But then what did you lose in your family unit, in your soul, in your purpose, in your pride, in the work of your hands, the sweat of your brows, like that joy of that in seeking that convenience. So that was another big click moment a couple years back that we had of once again, why do we do this? Like, why are we doing all this work? And connecting back to that.
Yeah. So like not everybody is going to have a dairy, right? That's just not going to happen. But I guess, can you give our listeners like maybe little ways that they can, if they're not going to raise their own beef or have a dairy for their milk or whatever, little ways that they can reconnect with their food? And then how would they also go about starting to source food more locally?
I'll let him go. I've been talking really forever.
Good topics, Justin. As far as starting your own dairy or sourcing just one cow for yourself, sourcing milk, you know, if you reach out to, it depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to network into the community to get it, then I would go to a feed supply, a co-op, your farmers markets. You know, network with people that you see that are doing that, and just start talking to them, you know, to figure out who in the area is doing those things, you know. You find a lot of resources by connecting in those different places. And then if you are wanting to do it yourself, as far as first you have to look at what you have for infrastructure, what you're going to be able to sustain. Are you able to sustain a cow and provide enough grass, or are you going to have to do a supplemental hay year round? Do you have the fencing and the property that is convenient for that, or not at all?
Or being able to do it as a community too.
Yeah, so we're doing it as a community.
We have friends that like they have a cow and they rotate the cow, or they rotate them who milks the cow. So like there's a gal that's near us that has a cow, and they have 3 or 4 different people that come milk it during the week, and they all are truly own part of that cow, to make the workload less and still each family have what they need. So there's different ways to get creative. Or we raise pigs, so we do pigs as well. And we traded like slop buckets, like bring us the slop buckets, and we'll make trades with you for all of your scraps in your house with different people. And we were able to do barter systems. So like I always tell people, you might not be able to do it on your land, but there might be ways you can get really creative of producing your own food with a group of others.
Correct.
Or like sourcing it, like you said, farmers markets, co-ops, Facebook groups. I love local Facebook groups. Like we have a local homesteader group for our county, and there's tons of connections to be made in there. Or I get messages from people all the time. Hey, so-and-so said that you have milk, or so-and-so said you have cows. We're looking for this. So just that old school networking, I would say. And then don't be afraid to like offer what you have as well. Like every small producer I know, we love supporting each other, even if it's like, I can make sourdough, but I'd rather support my friend who's excellent at making sourdough. And there's a need in so many different departments.
For sure. And that would be what you mentioned with sharing multiple families on one cow. That would be because your scheduling wouldn't allow you to necessarily be able to do it twice a day or once a day. And so knowing that ahead of time, then you look at what your options are to branch out from that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Creative ways.
I'm going to throw this out there, and then this will be my cue of whether Levi listens to the podcast or not afterwards, my husband. I mean, I would love that. I would love to have a cow if I knew somebody could milk a few days a week. That would be great. So if he tells me no to a cow, I know he's listened to this episode.
No, there's ways to make it work, for everybody. Or we know people that like they don't have the land, so they have their cow on a neighbor's property and they milk that cow every day. They just go down the road to milk it, and in exchange the neighbor gets the milk. Different some milks, different things.
Okay, this is going a different direction, but how many acres does it take of pasture to feed one cow if you're just feeding grass?
If you have good quality grass.
Well, you can't do grass all year long, so you have to do hay.
You will have to do hay at some point. But if you have good quality grass, then it varies from state to state a lot.
And cow to cow too.
And cow size, breed, all of that. But if you had a grass-fed genetics and you have good grass, good quality grass, and you do rotational grazing, so she's not on the pasture the whole time, but you can easily do a cow on 1 acre with proper care of that acre.
And depending on the grass quality.
There's also times in like Texas or Oklahoma or places where it's not as good of soil or grass, and you're going to end up needing a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Or a lot more supplemental hay. But
it's just interesting, I think, for perspective for our listeners, like how much land it actually takes to have a cow.
Yeah.
1 acre, if you're doing rotational grazing, 1 acre can support a cow.
With some supplement hay, like in the winter.
And then in the wintertime, you'll have to have supplemental hay.
Yeah. And that's what we do. We rotational graze on the land. And we started with bare woods. We started with woods, timber land that we had to turn into pasture land. So that was a process. It still is a process. But
we don't necessarily have really good quality river bottom type farming ground. Our ground is hilltops, and if you dig down 10, 12 inches, you can't grow anything. You can uncover 12 inches of soil and you'll never grow a thing there. Oh, wow. So our topsoil is important to us.
So you don't have to have perfect to get started. Just really creative, I think, and looking for ways. How can this work?
Okay. So before we wrap up, I have a question about how far out of town are you guys? Because for people that do live more urban and they're looking for ways to like connect to their farmers, I mean, some people are obviously going to be closer than others, but how far are you out from like a town or a city center?
We'd probably say about 45 minutes
would be our significant town.
Okay.
And by significant, it still doesn't have like a Target but we have a Walmart and a grocery store about 45 minutes away. And that's where we have like a local pickup for local people. And then we have 2 days a week that we drive the milk 45 minutes away to a fridge that we have there for pickup in that area. And that's how we work it. If anyone was going to start a herd share of any size, I'd highly recommend. There's just different laws in different areas. Farm to consumer legal defense is the way to go for that. They're absolutely incredible. We'll write you a herd share, know the laws in your state. And we work with them on that regard. So farm to consumer,
cool.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, that's great.
It's good information.
Yeah.
It's really good for everybody to hear what it takes, I think, because I don't know, sometimes also you see food prices and the expense of buying something raw, raw milk from a direct farm, rather than going to the grocery store, and you don't realize what's going in. So, and the work that goes in.
Yeah, I would say I was thinking about that the other night when he was gone and I was milking with all the kids out there, and it was hours. We were out there for about 3 hours. And, there's babies crying and I got the kids didn't get in bed till 10:30 that night. And it's like, there is so much, thank your farmer, thank your small producer. There's so much that goes in more than just, you might think, oh, they're just milking the cow. Like there is an entire life that they have to live around that. Or my friends that are market producers for farmers markets, they're 16 hours a day. They are on a super tight schedule. There's not much life outside of producing that. And once again, that's that lifestyle they want. But yeah, there is a lot of work involved in heart. Our label says, we started with 1 cow and for our table, and now we want this to be on your table, and we milk with love, right? Because it's really an active, I think all small farmers, it's an active service in a way for the community.
That's awesome.
That's great. Well, tell our listeners where they can find you outside this podcast, please.
Yeah, we are Wildstyle Family on Instagram. And then we also have a little website, wildstylefamilyfarm.com, mainly for our milk. If you want to see how we set that up, that's on there, and how we get our milking practices. But Wildstyle Family,
that's awesome.
Where you can find us.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
Thank you so much.
This was episode 4 in our 5-part series on food supply. We talked all about dairy, and we hope it got you thinking more about your food supply, the safety and quality of your food, and the stewardship in the growth and production of your food. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our deep dive series. Leave a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend, and find us on Instagram and YouTube, which is linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Boom Clap podcast, where culture and conviction collide.